In the text, the word automaton is used. In which connection is that? Fromm points out that the modern man is anxious and therefore they let themselves be dictated by some authority. This gives the man less responsibilities and they get to just be a part of something bigger without having to think that much for themselves. Fromm describes them as being a small cog in the machine. This means that they don't have to think by themselves, but just follow along. This may be a way of easy life, but it takes away some freedom. Because they've laid responsibility of their own choices upon someone else, they don't get to choose everything for themselves anymore. Therefore, Fromm describes the man as not yet free, but an automaton, just a simple robot. In the text, it is pointed out what modern man represses and worships. Comment on that. I think that Fromm has a point when he talks about that man represses the irrational passions by worshipping someone or something else. An idol is a way of distraction from one's everyday life. You get to deflect yourself onto someone else. And the idols Fromm are talking about are not from like the typical movie or music industry, but rather the religious idols. And personally, I feel that many of the religious books or stories are about hope and change. These idols therefore give man the hope of change and that they themselves or just the world is still able to change for the better. What is the stand on religion in the text, and do you agree with it? Though Fromm says that religion can be degrading for man themselves if the only purpose is to connect one with other people. But I don't think this is degrading in any way. This reason is just as valuable as any other. Religion often pulls people together when they're like in the most of need, and it can be to some extent be as a kind of support. The human is a social animal, and so it needs the feeling of belonging, and finding that in religion shouldn't be disregarded. In connection with the horrors of the Second World War, the term convenient rationalizations is mentioned. What is meant by that, and why are they thought to be dangerous? When problems are solved with convenient rationalization, it is often answered with some sort of optimistic delusions. It's a way of acknowledging it happened, but not really accepting that it happened. And when something like wars are explained with the use of convenient rationalization, it's hard to prevent anything of the sort from happening again, because the mindset often takes place from the starting point that nothing bad ever happens. And when this is the belief, something bad will probably happen. Is there not also perhaps beside an innate desire for freedom and an instinctive wish for submission? Try to explain what is meant by this, and in your own words. Well, all humans are born to be free. The whole idea of being locked up or controlled scares many, but still we think life is hard when we have too many choices to make. We still want to be restricted and limited, because when everything is possible, we become kind of like lost and confused. This is probably also what the title wants to point out, the paradox of freedom. Quote from the text: freedom is not less endangered if attacked in the name of anti-fascism than in that of outright fascism. What is meant by that? I think what he means is that even anti-fascism takes away the right to choose. If one is anti anything, even if it's anti for something horrible, they are to some extent anti-choice. As long as someone else controls what you're allowed to think, you're not really free. Do you think that circumstance, that any influence on the extent of which people accept authority and surveillance? The opinion upon surveillance is strikingly different depending on who you ask. Some people don't mind it, but then others do. And I think that the circumstances that a person is under can have an effect on the opinion. A regular non-criminal citizen who is living in a sketchy neighborhood may think that surveillance is great because then they're scared themselves and then they feel more safe. While someone who doesn't feel scared may not see the need for them, and they would often use the argument that surveillance would take away some of their freedom. And I think it generally depends on how safe a person already feels and their own trust and opinion upon the government.